Funny Games is a movie that centers around the absolutely hilarious children's game known as Let's Commit a Brutal Home Invasion, a movie that follows two misunderstood young men on their quest to acquire a carton of eggs. But on the way, as they embark on their perilous adventure, they'll come face to face with the full extent of horrors that this world has to offer. Austrian people. The movie begins with a family arriving at their lakeside holiday home. The father George, the mother Anna, the dog Rolfie, and the son, also George. They spot their next door neighbours, Fred and Eva, acting a little out of place as they're accompanied by two young men that the family doesn't seem to recognise. But after they make it to their house and begin to unpack, they're then paid a visit by Fred and one of the young men named Paul, who's supposedly the son of Fred's business friends because apparently he really likes the concept of taking his friend's young boys away into the wilderness. The other young man Peter then arrives as he tells Anna that he's been sent over by Fred's wife Eva to ask if he can have a few eggs. She obliges and offers Peter a handful, but on the way out, he accidentally drops them all over the floor as it appears that he's had an accident. That was rough. After quite clearly overstaying his welcome and awkwardly standing around asking for more, he then proceeds to accidentally knock the phone into a sink full of water because this man really hates technology. A few minutes after finally getting the man to leave, she then finds both Paul and Peter standing in her entranceway as Rolfie barks at them through the door and is refusing to let them leave. Rolfie has a natural born ability to sense the good, kind-hearted people in the world, and they must die. Paul then notices their golf clubs and asks if he can take one out for a swing, and after Anna agrees, we then see George and Georgie working down on the boat as they hear Rolfie's continuous barks come to a sudden stop with the sound of a yelp. After thinking that her good boy has just suddenly up and learned the basic concepts of the English language and has understood the term stop barking, Anna then once again finds the men inside of her home after Rolfie supposedly caused Peter to yet again drop another batch of eggs. Thinking that this man is racist against chickens, Anna finally decides that enough is enough and demands that the pair leave her house due to their dubious egg handling. They both begin to seem offended by the concept of being asked to leave, and Paul, like most people's ex-boyfriends, begins to gaslight Anna and attempt to make her seem like the unreasonable one. George then appears with his son, and Peter proceeds to become even more aggressive as he's now outright demanding the rest of the eggs from George before telling him to be careful or I'll break your eggs too. Joke's on Paul. George has already had his period. George slaps him across the face for the comment, so Peter reacts by breaking his leg open with a golf club because that's a perfectly reasonable reaction. Anna then walks back in, to once again be greeted by the attempts to gaslight, as they tell her that they had no choice but to defend themselves against the soft caress of George's hand. George then asks Peter why he's doing all of this, and he simply and calmly responds with the terrifying answer, why not? This is fun for the men. It's almost as if it's something that they do to pass the time to combat boredom, a funny game for the pair. After breaking George's leg, he then proceeds to break his heart by telling him that due to Rolfie stopping him from hitting the golf ball, he had to test the club out in some other way, before taking Anna and playing a game of hot and cold to direct her towards the body of the family dog. And once she eventually does find Rolfie, Paul breaks the fourth wall by winking at the camera because you the viewer are just that gorgeous. After finding Rolfie stuffed inside the car, Anna then finds herself in the exact same situation that her neighbours did earlier when they drove past. Some of her neighbours call out to her from the lake and see her with Paul, but she's forced to go along as normal and do absolutely nothing to raise the alarm as Paul finds out where the other family lives, because Peter's back at the house with the rest of the family and for some reason can't control his urge to break legs with golf clubs. Later that evening, the family are transported into the living room and it becomes apparent that the pair are playing some kind of game between themselves as they ask each other if lying is allowed. Peter, like the gentleman that he clearly is, then proceeds to attempt to shake George's hand, but after he refuses, it seems to insult Paul, resulting in him pushing Anna directly onto his badly broken leg as a kind of punishment. Anna tries to attack Paul because that wasn't a very nice thing to do, resulting in him punching her in the stomach as Peter stands on George's leg, followed by her moments later beginning to break down as little Georgie desperately does his best to try and defend his family. All the while, the two men are extremely calm and collected as they act like this is nothing out of the ordinary for them, to the point that they're not even hyped up on adrenaline as if it's just another mundane day. And Paul, wanting a bit more entertainment, then proceeds to tell the family that Peter is doing all of this because his mother divorced his father as a child because she wanted him all for herself, before changing the story up and saying they're actually doing this because they're addicts. Before once again changing the tale, and like the great friend that he is, saying that Peter sleeps with his own mother simply to see the reaction of the family, when in reality, none of those things are true. This is all just fun and games for the pair. They're not addicts robbing the wealthy to fund a habit. They're doing this simply for their own amusement. And after Paul is done telling fairy tales, he then suggests that they make a bet. And by suggests that they make a bet, I mean Paul tells everybody they're making a bet because the luxury of free will is something they simply cannot afford right now. He tells them to bet that they'll be alive by 9 AM tomorrow, while he makes the bet that they'll be dead, before then proceeding to turn to the camera and breaking the fourth wall once again, and asking the audience if they think they stand a chance, because your opinion is valued. They then turn their attention to young Georgie for a second, and cover his head with a pillowcase, as they wish to, quote, protect his moral decency, as they're going to force Anna to remove her clothing, because they'd apparently like to check if she's hiding any jelly rolls under there. But after Anna refuses the request, Paul makes it clear that it's a demand, and begins hurting Georgie until his father does what he's asked and tells Anna to remove her clothes. Which clearly brings Paul an immense amount of joy, as he's far more satisfied with the fact that he can make George demand his wife to remove her clothes than the actual fact of seeing her without them. It's almost as if that aspect doesn't matter to him. He's simply getting pleasure from the act itself and not the final outcome, which is made even more evident by the fact that as soon as her clothes are off, he tells her to put them right back on. And Georgie, feeling a bit cold, decides to wet himself for a little bit of warmth, and as Peter is taking him away to get changed, he then makes a run for it and climbs out of the upstairs window. Once out of the house, Georgie wades through the lake and around the fence to the neighbour's property, and turns around to see Paul following him with nothing more than a light jog, as he doesn't seem concerned in the slightest. While hiding in the house, after removing his wet overalls to not leave a trail, he spots a shotgun on the floor, before spotting a pair of feet emerging from the bathroom door, and realising that they belong to someone named Sissy, Fred's younger daughter and Georgie's friend. Well, ex-friend. After grabbing the gun for himself, he's then confronted by Paul, and as he begins walking towards him, he pulls the trigger. But much like the contents of Sissy's cranium in the other room, it's empty. Poof. So after bringing Georgie back as well as the gun, he hands it over to Peter with some shells. With all of this terrorising Paul's been doing, he's worked up quite an appetite, so decides to head into the kitchen to make himself a sandwich. But while he's in there, he hears the sound of the gun going off, followed by shouting and an ensuing struggle. But completely unfazed by this, without so much as a flinch, he continues to nonchalantly grab what he wants from the fridge and slowly makes himself a sandwich without a single ounce of urgency. With the camera focused on the TV covered in blood, we hear the pair arguing back and forth as Paul calls Peter an idiot for playing the game wrong, before we see that Georgie has been killed. Realising that they're not going to get any cooperation from the parents for their fun little games anymore, they decide that they're done and just get up and leave. With the sound of the men driving away in the distance, the movie lingers on a shot for an uncomfortable amount of time as it shows Anna staring directly ahead, almost as if she's just disassociated from the traumatic events that's just unfolded, as her son lays on the floor next to her, looking about 1 foot shorter. Eventually, without even acknowledging the death of her son, she gets up to turn the TV off and free herself. And after George is able to bring himself to sit up, he proceeds to painfully and hysterically cry, before the room is overcome with an eventual deafening silence as the pair attempt to comprehend what it is that's just happened. After a while of just sitting there, Anna manages to get George to his feet and begins to slowly help him leave the room, before she finally turns to see Georgie. They always did say that kid was brainless. After an incredibly painfully long one-take shot, the ex-parents then realise that they've been locked in, so devise a plan for Anna to climb out of the window and to run for help. So that's what Anna does. She makes a run for it, cutting a hole in the back fence, but suddenly spots a pair of headlights driving straight towards her. Not knowing who it is and thinking it would be terribly unfortunate to come head to head with Paul and Peter, she hides at the side of the road before attempting to flag down the car as it passes, but it's too late. She then spots another car coming, and not wanting to make the same mistake, this time she stays right where she is. It then cuts to George back at the house, covering up what little is left of Georgie, when suddenly he hears the front door open and sees a golf ball roll across the floor. It's gained sentience. I mean, Paul and Peter have returned with Anna, as she's bound and gagged. I guess leaving was just part of the fun for them. They wanted them to feel as if there was an end in sight. And then at the first chance of respite, they brutally and violently tear it away from them for their own sadistic pleasure. With George now even more badly beaten, they remove Anna's restraints and say that they're going to play another game, as apparently they've got more fun little games than Jigsaw himself. The rules of this one are simple. All Anna needs to do is to recite a prayer with no mistakes. If she does it right, then she gets to choose who dies first and how they die. Sounds like the end of your average game of Monopoly. After making her put her hands together and get on her knees, Anna recites a prayer correctly on the first go, but with there obviously being no way she was ever going to win this, Peter then tells her to do it backwards with no mistakes. But while he's busy being distracted doing the thing that he loves to do so much, talking, Anna grabs the gun, points it at Peter, and sends him flying across the room. But an ending like that would be far too satisfying, and Paul knows it. So he proceeds to quite literally break the fifth wall by picking up the TV remote and rewinding the very movie that he's currently starring in, so he can grab it for himself. So in retaliation for Anna going for the gun, he calmly walks over to George, aims, and fires. It then cuts to them walking down to the boat that George and Georgie were working on earlier in the movie, and Anna notices a knife that she told Georgie to give to his father the previous day. But just like the previous shotgun scene, this movie knows what you want, and it's not going to give it to you. The pair see that she's trying to cut her way out of the restraints, mock her for it, and then throw the knife into the lake. And while casually talking to each other about every psychopath's favourite hobby, antimatter and black holes, Paul asks Peter for the time. And after Peter tells him that it's a little bit past 8 in the morning, Paul casually pushes the bound and gagged Anna backwards into the water, stating that he did it early simply because he was starting to get hungry. And the movie then comes to an end, with the pair turning the boat around, docking at the neighbour's house who he spoke to earlier on the lake with Anna, before politely requesting some eggs with her because these growing boys really need their protein. I knew he had to be a psychopath wearing shorts like that. So before things come to an end, I'd like to just give a massive thank you to all of the YouTube members and the patrons. The people who every month, despite YouTube making it apparently obvious that they're not exactly fond of the type of content I make, continue to support the channel and keep showing up. And if you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or a patron, not only do you just generally support the channel, but you also get access to the private Discord server as well, which in turn gives you access to uncensored versions of all videos going forward. So starting off with this week's new YouTube members, a massive thank you to Cripples the Great, Dana Mansour, Mia, The Meme Dream, It's a Great Day 976, Johnny Jakella, Sir Spuddington, Rohan Nayak, Dade Furest, Top Nacho, Nero Karai, and the Pity family. And now for this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to Brandon Brown, Yanni1699, Marcel Schroeder, Chrono Steel, Harvey Landeros, Bass Reeves, Austin Schmidt, Spencer Ulbrich, Cheesy Pepper Jacks, Julia, Alex, Lucas John, Jordan Trehan, Josh Shekel, Banana Man, Jaleel, Samantha Richards, Hot Potato, Xavier Moore, Ryan Brown, and Lord Bull. So once again, a massive shout out to all YouTube members and patrons, and a huge thank you to everyone else for watching.